and serving in office anywhere in this land that will do that. He has staunchly defended the Constitution of the United States. He has stood for the Word of God against national sins. He is against the murder of the unborn by abortion. He is for the defunding of Planned Parenthood. He is against the redefinition of marriage and believes firmly that it is only between a man and a woman. And he is against all threats against the traditional family order. He is a fighter and a champion for right. I have known him as an honorable Christian man. I respect him. I pray for him daily. And he is, as he's facing attacks that would completely crush most men. Really, the weight on me is so minuscule compared to what he has to face every day. It's my honor to introduce to you Judge Roy Moore.
Well, thank you very much. What an honor it is to be with you. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. It is a great honor to be here, and I thank Pastor Webb for the invitation and Pastor Allison for the introduction. And it was, I'm a little humbled to follow a teacher or a preacher from Texas. They do everything big in Texas, and we're just little Alabama, so you have to get used to that. But I will act like a preacher a little bit and take off my watch and set it here so I don't, that's what preachers do. You know what that means, don't you? Not much. But anyway, especially it doesn't mean much when you can't see the hands. But anyway, I'll try. As I came here, I didn't know exactly. I haven't got a planned speech, but it rhymes with what you've been listening here. God Save America. And on the wall you can see, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from the wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. I want to tell you, I'm running for the United States Senate, as you know. But I'm not going to heal your land. Neither is President Trump, President Obama, any president, any Supreme Court, any senator, or any representative. They're not going to heal your land. Right. Only God will heal your land. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit because I'm playing a little part in this scenario going on in the country. Obviously, I've made a few people mad. I'm the only one that can unite Democrats and Republicans. Because I seem to be opposed by both. They've spent over $30 million trying to take me out. They've done everything they could, and now they're together to try to keep me from going to Washington. And why? But it has a lot to do with what we're talking about tonight. We want our country to be saved by God, but we've got a part in it if we humble ourselves and pray and seek His face and turn from our wicked ways. But it goes further in 2 Chronicles, and it says this: but if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, which I have set before you, and shall go and serve other gods and worship them, then will I pluck them up by the roots out of my land which I have given you. And this house which I have sanctified for my name will I cast out of my sight. And this house shall be astonishment to everyone that passeth by. So that you say, why has the Lord done thus into this land and into this house? And it shall be answered, because they forsook the Lord God of their fathers. I submit to you that today, if we want God to save our country, if we want our country saved, it will only be God. And if we want God to save our country, we've got to stand for His acknowledgement. We've got to talk about God. We've got to recognize the relevance of God in this country. And you young people, First, let me say, this is the most beautiful choir I believe I've ever seen. Give them a hand, because they really... That's what we need in Washington. That's what will be in Washington, because we will pass away and their generation will come forward and do this. You know, we've got a real battle going. I kind of remember a story about little Johnny. I'll tell you about little Johnny. This older judge had a case before him, and he had to have this young child come in and testify. Now, we all have sympathy. Judges have sympathy for young children. They don't like to put them on the stand, but sometimes they have to. And so he got little Johnny up on the stand. This was a hardened old judge, and he said, he looked down at the little boy, 6 years old, and he said, Johnny, he said, do you know what it means to tell the truth? Johnny said, yes, sir, I do. And he said, why should little boys tell the truth, Johnny? And Johnny looked up at the judge and said, because God says so, Judge. Well, in our courts today, we don't like to talk about God and about the relevance of God and whether God has anything to do with our law or anything to do with our country. And this kind of took the judge back a little bit. So he said very bluntly to Johnny, I know that, Johnny. I know that, Johnny. And I messed up that joke. But he said, what happens to little boys who don't tell the truth? Johnny looked back up and said, well, they go to hell, Judge. Well, now, if you think judges don't want to talk about God in this country, they sure don't want to talk about hell. So this judge was a little antagonized by this little boy. He wanted to talk about God and wanted to talk about hell. And he turned to Johnny and said, we know that, Johnny, but tell me, why? You know, Johnny said, isn't that enough? Isn't that enough? Isn't it enough that we have a God that gave us a country that we're living in? Isn't it enough that we have a God that gave us our rights? You know, I'll tell you why I'm facing what I'm facing. Because I came up, and when I was a little boy, I went to Texas in the second grade. And the year before I started school in Alabama, before I went to Texas, they had a National Day of Prayer established by President Harry Truman. This is after World War II. Harry Truman knew we needed the presence of God. He was a Democrat, by the way. In his first inaugural address, he said, the American people stand firm in the faith which has inspired this nation from the beginning. We believe that all men are created equal because they're created in the image of God. And from that faith, we will not be moved. Well, I went to school next year, 1953. And by 1954, a new president had taken over by the name of Dwight David Eisenhower. He was a Republican. And in this presidential administration, he decided that we would, and the legislature, put under God in the pledge. And they did that. So that the children of our land in the daily recitation of the pledge in school will be daily impressed with the true understanding of our way of life and its origins, according to the legislative history. Amen. By the addition of the phrase under God to the pledge, the consciousness of the American people will be more alerted to the true meaning of our country and its form of government, according to the legislative history. They didn't think it violated the law. They didn't think that acknowledging this God of the Holy Scriptures was a violation of anything. It should be pointed out, they said, that the adoption of this legislation in no way runs contrary to the provisions of the First Amendment. This is not an act establishing a religion or one interfering with the free exercise of religion. And then they said this, which most Americans, most Christians have forgotten and do not understand. In Washington, all the way down to Alabama and out to the West Coast, a distinction must be made between the existence of religion as an institution and a belief in the sovereignty of God. And they followed it up the next year by putting in God we trust on all our money. And by the time I reached the 4th grade, they gave us a national motto, in God we trust. But what have we done today? Are we still standing in that faith? Or have we forgotten it? By 1962, the United States Supreme Court took prayer out of school. Bible reading followed Abington versus Sheffield. Then they started to create new rights in 1965. And today we've got a problem. So I like to begin with that little video to show you what the real problem is. There's important people in that video. The guy that was cross-examining me was Bill Pryor, now sitting on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. And he asked me, will you continue to acknowledge God as you said you would here today? And I said, I think I must. Even if you continue to hold your job. See, today we find out that people would rather hear criticisms of a person than look at what he's done for 20 to 30 to 40 years. I knew what I was facing when I said that. I knew that I could lose my job. And you know, I could have avoided it. All I had to say, well, it was just historical. I knew that's what they wanted me to say. They would rather be kept my job and bow down to secular humanism than to acknowledge the sovereignty of the Judeo-Christian God. And I'm telling you, we cannot have a country. We cannot save our country if we do not acknowledge this God. That's the first step, is to acknowledge God. Bring Him back into our public discourse. Understand His relation to the Constitution of the United States. And He is directly related. He is directly related to everything you hold dear. Your rights of life, liberty, and the right to pursue your happiness under His laws. And we forget that. If we do not acknowledge this God, who gives us our rights? The United States government? It does not. The United States Constitution? It does not. The Bill of Rights is to secure the rights for us that God gave to us. And when we don't acknowledge God, we've already given up those rights. Our founding fathers knew this. Martin Luther King knew this. Frederick Douglass knew this. Abraham Lincoln knew this. We've got to go back to an understanding of the relevance of God. So I was removed in November of 2003. And I did run some other campaigns. And in 2012, I ran against the Chief Justice and was elected. I must admit to you, I didn't want to cause controversy. I didn't want to get in trouble again. I didn't want again to be investigated, as I have been over 5 statewide campaigns and 2 major controversies over religious liberty and the 10 Commandments. But when a federal district judge without authority tried to intimidate our probate judges to start doing same-sex marriage, I had to speak up. And we stopped same-sex marriage for a time. And our court issued injunctions when a case was brought before them without my involvement, because I was recused from that part. Then the United States Supreme Court made the ruling. And then our court asked the parties to tell us what effect that ruling had on this injunction. And then they said, well, we just won't. They decided not to vote. And so I got involved in the case. They had to vote. And then they said, we will maintain our injunctions. When I wrote an opinion that said the United States Supreme Court does not have that authority, when they ignored the relevance of God, that God, as they had recognized in their former decisions, would instituted marriage, I got in some more trouble. And I got suspended. And now I'm running for Supreme Senate of the United States. What do you think I'm going to do? Why do you think they're giving me this trouble? Why do you think I'm being harassed by media and by people pushing forward allegations in the last 28 days of this election? Last 30 days it began. After 40-something years of fighting this battle, I'm now facing allegations. And that's all the press want to talk about. But I want to talk about the issues. I want to talk about where this country's going. And if we don't come back to God, we're not going anywhere. I believe that there's a new day coming. But what I wanted to talk to the young people about, and the people, you out here, is about what kind of battle this is. This is not just a battle for Democrats and Republicans and how they vote on issues. This is a spiritual battle. And you know what Paul said. Finally, brethren, be strong in the Lord and the power of His might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness in this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Therefore, taking you the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand an evil day, and having done all to stand. I'm telling you, this is an evil day. This is a day when people would take away your rights, the government would take away your rights of religious freedom, religious liberty. We've got to stand. Stand therefore, as it said, your loins girded about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Having on the, above all, taking the shield of faith, for which you shall quench the fiery darts of the wicked one. And the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, the Lord. Praying always with all prayer and supplication for all spirits. And watching thereto with all perseverance and all supplication for all the saints. Amen. And as for me, that God may give me utterance, that utterance may be given me, that I may open my mouth boldly and make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador of bonds, that therein I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. See, that's what I want to do. I want to speak the truth. I want to take the truth about God to our capital. And that's what I will do, if it's God's will. If it's not God's will, I pray that I don't get put in that position. That's not what He wants. You, young people, will face the same battles, no matter whether it's in school, on your job, in your government, wherever you go. If you take a stand, you're going to come under persecution. It's nice in churches not to talk about persecution, I guess, in some churches. But I'm going to tell you, it's part of it. It says that's your reward. That's your reward. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on the candlestick, and it giveth light to all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. You know, if you had a candle and you put it on the piano here and you cover it with a bushel basket, it doesn't do much good if it's really dark. You've got to let your light shine. You don't put it under a bushel basket. Then you will be a light. Then our country will follow. That's what we need. Without God, we will remain a divided society. You can't be united without you recognize that Creator God which created us all equal in His sight. We've got to go back to recognition of God. We're wondering why all these tragedies are hitting our country. And don't think when you get and stand for the truth, when you stand for the recognition of God, that you're not going to be attacked. And that you're not going to be attacked in ways that you may think very strange. Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you as though some strange thing happened to you, but rejoice inasmuch as you are partakers of Christ's suffering, that when His glory may be revealed, you may be glad also with exceeding joy. If ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye, for the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. On their part he is evil spoken of, but on your part he is glorified. Amen. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's matters. Yet if any man suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God on this behalf. Right. For the time has come that judgment must begin at the house of God. Amen. If earth begin the earth, what shall the others be that glorify not His name? And if the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly appear? Wherefore, let them that suffer according to the will of God commit the keeping of their soul to Him in well-doing, as unto a faithful Creator. I'm telling you, it's not easy. It's not an easy road. It's not easy to be desired. But if it's God's will, that's what you need to do. Right. That's what you need to do, because that's what God would have you do. He would have all you young people grow up. And there's a role for you. Whether it's in government, whether it's in law, whether it's in medicine or whatever, you've got a role as a parent, as a teacher, as a husband or wife. You've got a role. You've got to take that. And don't worry, for God will fight your battles for you. Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be envious against the workers of iniquity. For they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the land. And verily thou shalt be filled. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and He'll give you the desires of your heart. Commit your ways unto the Lord, and He shall bring it to pass, and He shall bring forth your righteousness as a light, and His judgment as a noonday. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil. Well, I don't want you to think that we struggle to make our country great again, that it's impossible. There have been periods of time in our country where we have forgotten God. You know, we just finished Veterans Day, and I'm proud to be a veteran. How many veterans we have in here? Amen. Give them a hand. Any in World War II? Anybody in World War II? Korea? Vietnam? Desert Storm? We fought wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, for example. But there was one war in the 1860s that did tear us apart. North and the South. And in the midst of that war, the Senate of the United States sent a message to the President of the United States asking him to declare a day of humiliation and prayer. Whereas the Senate of the United States, devoutly recognizing the supreme authority and just government of Almighty God in all the affairs of men and nations, has by resolution requested the President to designate and set apart it for national prayer and humiliation. Wouldn't it be nice if the Senate and the House sent a message to the President asking him to declare a day devoutly recognizing the supreme authority and just government of Almighty God? Amen. And President Lincoln did that. And I think in his message is a message for our country today. I think his message was for them, and it is for us today. He said, whereas it is the duty of nations, as well as of men, to own their dependence on the all-ruling power of God, to confess their sins and transgressions in humble sorrow, yet with assured hope that genuine repentance will lead to mercy and pardon, and to recognize the sublime truth announced in the Holy Scriptures that those nations only are blessed whose God is the Lord. You know, isn't it nice for the President to recognize that we're a blessed nation because of God? And Abraham Lincoln continued further, and he said, and insomuch as we know that by his divine laws, nations like individuals are subjected to punishments and chastisements in this world, may we not justly fear the awful calamity of civil war, which now desolates the land, but a punishment inflicted upon us for our presumptuous sins, to the needful end of our national reformation as a whole people. I got in trouble for that saying, because I said that by his divine laws, maybe this nation is subjected to punishments and chastisements. They wanted to say that I said God set punishments on us like the Twin Towers. I didn't say that. May it not be. I just quoted the President of the United States. You can't even quote the President of the United States anymore about God. We have been the recipient of the choicest bounties of heaven, Lincoln said. True it is. We are blessed in this country. We've got more than our fathers and our grandfathers. You young people, some of you older people can remember what your grandfathers didn't have. We have been the recipient of the choicest bounties of heaven. We've grown in numbers, wealth, and power as no other nation has ever grown. That's undisputed. But we have forgotten God. We have forgotten the gracious hand which preserved us in peace and multiplied, enriched, and strengthened us. And we have vainly imagined in the deceitfulness of our own hearts that all of these blessings were produced by some superior wisdom and virtue of our own. Intoxicated with unbroken success, we've become too self-sufficient to feel the necessity of redeeming and preserving grace, too proud to pray to the God who made us. We've become that way. We've become proud when a federal district judge out west causes a man to lose his job because he kneels on the 50-yard line and silently prays because he was started to be joined by the other teams, his team, and then the fans came down and they'd had enough. You know, Lincoln thereafter saw the greatest loss of lives in American history in 3 days. 50,000 men died on the fields of Gettysburg. You know, that's 15 times what happened at Pearl Harbor or the Twin Towers. Those were terrible tragedies. Not taking anything away, that's a terrible tragedy in our country. But Gettysburg was 50,000 men. And as he looked over the battlefield, he gave that short address, which we could take heart from today. It said 70 years ago. Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. We are now engaged in the great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceited, so dedicated, can so long endure. We are met on the great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot hallow, we cannot dedicate, we cannot hallow, we cannot consecrate this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here. And perhaps they will forget what we say here. But we shouldn't. We shouldn't forget what these pastors are teaching about God in America. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work. It's they who fought here thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take an increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. And the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. You know, that's our challenge today. And we can accept it, or we can go and we can get high offices, we can go to jobs, and we can play the game of the world and deny our God, and we get nowhere for it. Or we can stand up, as Paul did, as Daniel did, as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did, and Azariah, Hananiah, and Mishael, their names. They knew that they might die. It didn't matter. They would not deny the sovereignty of their God. Amen. That's what we need in our country today. I'll close with this, because I wrote this many years ago, not knowing how much I would need it someday. Today we face another war. Fought not upon some distant shore, nor against the foe that you could see, but one as ruthless as could be. He'll take your life and your children too, and say there's nothing you can do. He'll make you think that wrong is right. Tis but a sign to stand and fight. And when we face the wrath of hell, against those gates we shall prevail. In homes and schools across our land, it's time for Christians to take a stand. When our work on earth is done and the battle is over and the victory is won, when through all the earth His praise will ring and all the heavenly angels will sing, it will be enough just to see the Son and hear Him say, "My child, well done. You kept my faith so strong and true. I knew that I could count on you." Can He count on you today? There is a price. There is a price. And God's always in charge. And He'll determine the future of our country and for your children and grandchildren. But you've got to do it together. I believe what the pastor said earlier. There's a new day coming. I believe God's heard the cry of His children. And I believe He will answer that cry. I believe He will turn our nation back to what it was. One people, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May God bless you, the state of Alabama and the United States of America. Thank you.
Sing a couple of songs, and then my favorite preacher in America, Dr. Larry Brown, is going to come preach for us. And you guys come sing, and Dr. Brown, when they get done, you come preach.